The electronic data interchange, what we call EDI, is one of the first e-commerce applications that we used for transmitting business transactions. This involved the exchange and transmission of business documents in a machine-processable format. The benefits that we had with EDI was less paperwork. We're doing everything electronically. Because of the electronics involved, there were fewer errors that would occur during the exchange of information. It gave us a better and faster information flow. We had less rekeying of data to go through, because if you can electronically send me a form, that's different than if you faxed me a form. If you faxed me a form, I'd still have to rekey the information into my system. But if you can electronically exchange it to me, then it should go straight into my system, and I don't have to rekey it. Fewer communication delays, and of course, that can improve things like invoicing and payment processes. Now, within the EDI, we have to have some sort of communication software. We also have to have some software to do translation if needed, and a set of standards. Now, the communication software would indicate to us when a transmission started and ended. The translation software's job is to map the data fields, because it might be coming from an application that had a different set of fields than the system I'm going to put it into, so we needed to have something to map those fields from one to the other. The good news is that we would set up our formatting to the EDI standard, because it made it an easy way to map and convert data. By everybody communicating on the same language, basically, a standard, then it made it very easy to be able to know exactly what this data was, what it meant for us, and to be able to write systems or programs to read it and translate it. Traditionally, there were three functions that are involved in moving data through the EDI. We had the communication handler that was designed to transmit or receive the information under a variety of different types of communication media. And I say different types because, when it came to communications, we're talking about sending ones and zeros. We already know we can do that through electrons, we can do it through photons, radio frequency, everything short of a smoke signal. EDI interface is another part of what we need, another function. And that function was to manipulate the routing information, or the routing of data, between the application and the communications handler. Now there, we might have, again, the EDI translator, because the application that we're using might not have put data into the format, the standard format of EDI, so that we'd have to have a way of making sure that we could translate the information from our application into the format needed for the EDI interface. Often we would use what was called an API, an application programming interface, or an application interface. Now, the application system is that program that we used that would process the data sent or process the data received to or from the partner. Web-based EDI is becoming more prominent because of things like, using the internet. Through the internet service providers, we were able to get generic network access for computers that are connected to the internet. It was easy to attract new partners by using websites to exchange information, to be able to take orders, and of course to be able to link to our back-end order processing. Now, we also have new security products. We haven't always had secure communications on the internet. It's been a while since we had the secure socket layer, but at one point that was new, and there are many other products out there to improve security. We also have improvements in the X.12 EDI format standard as well. By using EDI, as we come into audit, that means we need to have a good understanding of the EDI process so that, again, we can have an effective audit. One of the more prevalent risks was in the transaction authorization and the authentication, since it was difficult to detect any human element or signature. Basically, we might receive a transmission, but really, is there a way to be able to verify who sent it? And if we don't know who sent it, then how do we know what permissions they have? Now, in the absence of a trading partner agreement, we would have some uncertainty about the specific legal liabilities. So it's important, when we started doing these communications, to make sure that there was an agreement, so that when there was an error, we would know who was at fault. There's also a concern of attacks against the EDI applications, because those certainly would affect the transactions of the company. And of course, additional risks would include things like unauthorized access, deletion or manipulation of transactions, maybe the loss of confidentiality. The security risks in EDI can be addressed through general controls and establishing an added layer of application control procedures for the EDI process. Some examples of these controls and protections would be things like having standards to the message format and content, having controls there to ensure that the transmissions are properly converted, receiving controls to test the messages that we've received, controls to establish safeguards against attacks of manipulation, having methods to establish the source of a transmission, maybe direct transmission channels, a proper encryption scheme, and the use of electronic signatures and message authentication codes. Control should ensure that all inbound EDI transactions are accurate and completely received, as well as making sure they're only processed once. Now, some of the considerations you have for the inbound transactions, of course, right at the top of the list, encryption, ways to identify erroneous or invalid transaction, hopefully a computerized check to look at the transaction's reasonableness, meaning does it look like it's within the bounds and scope of what I expect to see, appropriate transaction logs, especially good for reconciliation, maintaining records of the transmissions, and using control totals to be able to verify the numbers and the values, as well as reconciliation with the partners. When we look at the outbound transactions and the types of controls we'd use, you'd probably include things like controls to help control the setup and the exchange of trading partner details, a method of comparing transactions with the trading partner profiles, matching the trading partner to a master file, limiting the authority of users to initiate specific types of EDI transactions, maybe having a separate type of path of communication for high-risk transactions, making sure you can log the payment transactions for review before the transmission, and make sure that you have segregation, of duties, and a way of reporting any unusual transactions for review. The auditor who evaluates EDI should make certain that inbound transactions are accurately passed to an application, and also make sure they're processed only once. Now, to accomplish this, the auditor could review things like the internet encryption processes that are used, have edit checks to identify erroneous or unusual transactions, have the use of computerized checking software to assess transaction validity, maybe making sure that those inbound transactions are logged, having controls used on the transactions to verify numbers and values, and of course, making sure that you can verify or that there's a process to verify the validity of the sender.